And our headlines on this Thursday afternoon, August 31st, here in South Korea. North Korea engages in a fresh display of defiance by firing 2 short-range ballistic missiles toward the East Sea Wednesday night in what it claims was part of a tactical nuclear strike drill in response to South Korea's military exercise with the US. Meanwhile, officials here vow to support the local seafood market amid Japan's release of radioactive wastewater into the ocean and to spur spending by designating October 2nd a holiday this year to allow for an extended period of leisure and consumption. And health authorities here in South Korea lowered their disease classification of COVID-19 to level 4, the same as influenza. Accordingly, related testing now requires a fee, but vaccination remains free. North Korea has put into action its recent words of aggression. Late Wednesday evening, the regime launched 2 short-range ballistic missiles toward the East Sea. Our defense correspondent Jong reports.
North Korea has fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles in a display of discontent over Seoul and Washington's combined military drills. According to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, North Korea launched 2 SRBMs toward the East Sea from the Sunan area between 11:40 and 11:50 p.m. on Wednesday. The JCS confirmed that both flew around 360 kilometers before landing in the East Sea. Considering the flight distance, it seems likely that the launch was a test to show that the North is capable of hitting South Korea's Garyongdae military complex, where the headquarters of the Army, Navy, and Air Force are located.
If the missiles are launched from the Sunan area and can travel around 400 kilometers, I think we cannot rule out the possibility that it could target Garyongdae.
Wednesday's provocation is the first ballistic missile launch in almost 40 days. The launch appears to be retaliation against Seoul and Washington's Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise, particularly as the 2 sides on Wednesday held a joint air drill over the West Sea involving a U.S. B-1B strategic bomber. The JCS strongly condemned the launch, calling it an act of significant provocation that undermines peace and stability. The U.S. also denounced Pyongyang's provocations and reaffirmed its ironclad commitment to South Korea.
This launch is in violation of multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions and possesses a threat to the DPRK's neighbors and international community. Our commitment to the defense of the Republic of Korea, Japan remains ironclad.
North Korea's state-run media also reported that its leader visited the military's command post on Tuesday as the regime commenced a command drill involving the entire army.
This could be seen as North Korea's version of the Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise, which strongly aims to counter the South's drills with the U.S.
The report also said the drill was preparation for a full-scale war to occupy all territory in the South. Jong, Arirang News.
And the White House has raised fresh fears about a possible food-for-weapons deal between Moscow and Pyongyang. Now, that being said, over at the United Nations, Seoul, Tokyo and Washington renewed their condemnation of such collusion. Our Yoon reports.
The White House said on Wednesday that new intelligence shows Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have swapped letters as Russia looks to North Korea for munitions for the war in Ukraine. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby highlighted that the latest finding comes just weeks after the visit of Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu to Pyongyang, and that Russian and North Korean talks on weapons sales were advancing. It has also been determined that Russia was looking to broker a food for arms deal with North Korea, in which Moscow would provide the North with food and other commodities in return for munitions from Pyongyang. Meanwhile, at the United Nations on Wednesday, the United States, the United Kingdom, South Korea, and Japan urged North Korea to halt arms negotiations with Russia, adding that any Russian-North Korean arms deals would violate UN Security Council resolutions that prohibit all member states, including Russia, from buying or obtaining any arms from the North. In a joint statement delivered by U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, she highlighted that this is not the first time Russia has moved to violate Security Council resolutions to pursue its illegal war against Ukraine. And Russia's pattern of behavior that flouts its responsibilities as a member of the Security Council is unacceptable. The United States pledged to take direct action by exposing and sanctioning individuals and entities working to facilitate arms deals between Russia and North Korea. Yoon, Arirang News.
This year's Ilchi Freedom Shield military training, which comes to a close on this Thursday, also included the involvement of nations beyond South Korea and the US. Our foreign affairs correspondent Pyeonji has more.
9 other United Nations member states other than the U.S. have sent additional military personnel to support this year's Ilchi Freedom Shield exercise, which focuses on preparing for a rapid transition to wartime operations in case of an attack from North Korea. That includes Australia, Canada, Britain, New Zealand, and Italy. At Camp Humphreys, a U.S. military base in South Korea on Wednesday, service members who took part explained what they were able to learn throughout the training. Canadian Army Major Simon Johnson, who works as the operations officer of the United Nations Command, explains that Canada has sent over 20 participants to South Korea for the exercise.
It enables us to really understand how one another operate, and if things were to escalate within the peninsula, we already have a team of people who have a common understanding of what needs to be done, what the ground looks like, how the headquarters operates. So I think.
Lieutenant Commander Kang Young-uk from the Canadian Navy, who has been working in the United Nations Command since last summer, shared a story of his grandfather who was killed in action during the Korean War. His grandfather's last words written on a picture of him read, "I will complete my mission and protect the country with my life."
My father was only 1 year old at the time, so I wasn't able to hear a lot of personal stories. But my grandfather must have been very young at the time he fought in the war, and I always remember that while I serve in the military, and it means a lot to me.
Corporal Sian Owen from the British Air Force, whose role is to be a direct link between the United Nations Command and the Surgeon's Office, says while taking part in the drill, they were able to get a good insight into how other countries work within their militaries.
We are one of the member states, so we all need to get involved and ensure that we're all working collectively so that if real-life scenarios came into place, then we would all know what we're doing.
Natasha Bogan from the New Zealand Air Force, who is a legal advisor at the United Nations Command, said it was interesting to see how they can strengthen the interoperability to support the Korean Peninsula.
It's been a really interesting experience. A variety of different nations supporting the exercise, learning about their backgrounds, learning about their legal considerations. It's been really fascinating.
The 11-day annual combined exercise that kicked off last week will run until Thursday. Pyeonji, Arirang News.
On the economic front, concerns about a potential recession are being aggravated by statistics for the month of July that show a slump in industrial output, retail sales and facility investment all at the same time, a phenomenon last seen back in January. Our trade correspondent Moon Hae-ryun reports.
South Korea's overall industrial production, spending and investments all fell for the first time since January this year. According to Statistics Korea on Thursday, industrial production in July fell by 0.7% from the month before, following a rise across all 3 sectors between May and June. It's the first time in 3 months that industrial production has seen a downturn on month, a situation that has been attributed to the decline in output from the mining, manufacturing, gas and electricity industries. Production in the electronic components sector showed a sharp decrease of over 11%, but a 28.5% increase in the production of apparel during the same period limited the overall decrease. Output in the service sector also saw a decline due to production falling in the dining and accommodation sector in July. Facility investments saw the biggest decline in over 11 years, falling by nearly 9%. This was due to a downturn in the transportation and machinery sectors, which fell by over 3%. In particular, investments in the transportation sector fell by over 22%, owing to the poor performance of automobiles in retail sales. Retail sales, a key gauge of private spending, fell by over 3% overall due to weakened demand for durable goods, including automobiles.
The termination of the cut in the buyer's tax for passenger cars in June led to the decline of automobile sales on month in July by 12.3% from a 13% increase in June.
Seoul cut the tax on car purchases from 5% to 3.5% back in 2018 and extended it in a bid to boost domestic demand during the COVID-19 pandemic. The decision to terminate the extension in June came as the country's tax revenue fell in recent months and auto sales peaked. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Also on the local front, October 2nd has been designated a holiday just for this year to allow for an extended period of rest and spending, starting from the Chuseok holiday that begins on September 28th to end on October 3rd, which marks National Foundation Day. The efforts are underway to ensure stable prices and to offer coupons for accommodation, as well as to attract foreign tourists during the 6-day holiday. Presiding over Thursday's emergency economic meeting, President Yoon Suk-yeol also revealed that priority for the latter half of this year has been placed on supporting the livelihoods of people. Meanwhile, the government is also poised to set aside over $60 million from its reserve fund to support the local seafood market amid consumer concerns fueled by Japan's release of Fukushima radioactive wastewater. Relatedly, gift certificates and discounts of up to 60% for seafood will be available. Korea is hoping to become a startup powerhouse by greatly expanding related support and investment. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young has details.
The government is rolling up its sleeves to become one of the world's top 3 startup nations. The goal was announced by the Ministry of SMEs and Startups on Wednesday with the comprehensive measures that unveiled during a Startup Korea strategy meeting held by President Yoon.
정부가 주도하고 있는 스타트업 생태계 역시 민간 중심, 시장 중심으로 과감하게 바꿔 나가야 된다고 생각합니다. 민간이 투자를 주도하고 스스로 생태계를 키우고 또 정부는 민간 모펀드에 대한 일정한 출자와 또 세제 지원 이런 방식으로 확대해 나가야 된다고 봅니다.
The ministry will expand venture investment by establishing a Startup Korea fund worth 2 trillion Korean won or roughly $1.5 billion in which both public and private sectors will invest. This will increase the size of venture investment from last year's $9.4 billion to $10.7 billion by 2027. Areas of investment include deep tech sectors such as system semiconductors and AI, while it will be also used for global expansion. The government is also diversifying its method of startup support, which had previously consisted of subsidies. While increasing the subsidy amounts, authorities are also reviewing a method where a portion of the additional support received would be reclaimed when revenue is generated. For instance, if there is a startup that has been receiving a subsidy of 100 million won, it would receive 130 million won in total support, with the additional 30 million won being recovered over several years once it starts making money. For the globalization of the startup and venture ecosystem, the government will also support Koreans who start businesses overseas. The global fund that supports domestic startups to go abroad will be expanded to around $7.5 billion by next year. It will also introduce a new program called Global Tips to support the startups that receive investments from foreign venture capitalists and establish offshore corporations. Within 4 years, the ministry aims to have 5 startups on the global top 100 list of unicorn companies or companies worth over $1 billion. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
And starting today here in Korea, COVID-19 shares the same level of concern as influenza, as its classification has been lowered to level 4. Accordingly, testing now requires a fee, but vaccination remains free. Our Choi Soo-young has more.
With COVID-19's infectious disease categorization being lowered from level 2 to level 4, a care system similar to that for influenza is being implemented within the general healthcare system. Infectious diseases are categorized into different levels based on their risk of spreading. When the coronavirus was first detected here in January 2020, it was classified as a level 1 disease, a highly contagious infection, or one with the most risk of spreading. Just over 2 years later, on April 25, 2022, the government declared it a level 2 disease in the same grouping as tuberculosis, measles, and cholera, and after another year and 4 months, level 4 like the flu. The most significant change is that there will be no more daily reporting of confirmed cases numbers. Instead, the government plans to operate a more precise monitoring system to observe COVID-19 trends on a weekly basis. The system will be operated through 527 monitoring agencies, and starting on September 13th, the disease status will be announced every Wednesday. Additionally, rapid antigen and PCR testing conducted at doctors' offices and screening clinics must now be paid for. Mandatory mask wearing at high-risk facilities such as hospitals and nursing homes for the elderly will continue, as will the recommended 5-day isolation for confirmed cases. Even with the transition to a level 4 infectious disease healthcare system, vaccinations will still be available free of charge. The government and healthcare experts strongly advise getting vaccinated, highlighting that an annual shot will effectively reduce mortality and severe illness rates among high-risk groups.
Obviously, in protection of ourselves, vaccination would be strongly recommended if a person has not gotten yet. What I've noticed more commonly recently is that people who come in with rather relatively higher or severe symptoms, they tend to have not yet experienced COVID, or they have not received vaccinations.
The government plans to maintain a direct COVID-19 response team at the Ministry of Health and Welfare, instead of relying only on administrative agencies in the case of a possible winter resurgence. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Also today, information about postpartum care support for mothers and their newborns offered by Seoul's Health Ministry will be available in 7 languages, including English, Japanese and Chinese. The support program largely targets families with incomes that are up to 150% lower than the median income. And findings show some 17% of the families that received related support in the first half of this year were multicultural. Over in the U.S., President Joe Biden has sounded the alarm yet again over the crisis faced by countries amid climate change while addressing the rampant repercussions of Hurricane Idalia. Our Ising-jae reports.
As Hurricane Idalia moved through the Big Bend region of northern Florida on Wednesday, it weakened to a tropical storm. But what was once a Category 3 hurricane caused massive flooding and damage in affected areas and left at least 2 people dead. Both victims had been involved in separate traffic accidents while driving during the massive storm. According to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, all 8 of Florida's urban search and rescue teams had been deployed, while some 5,500 National Guardsmen were helping clear roads of debris. Thousands of repairmen are currently working to restore power in affected areas. The federal government, meanwhile, sent thousands of search and rescue personnel, along with drinking water and ready-to-eat meals. Idalia has already left Florida, passed through the state of Georgia, and is currently making its way up through the eastern South Carolina, from where it's set to move off land and into the Atlantic Ocean. In response to the devastating hurricane, President Joe Biden said Wednesday that no one can deny the impacts of the climate crisis.
I don't think anybody can deny the impact of the climate crisis anymore. Just look around. Historic floods, historic floods. More intense droughts, extreme heat, significant wildfires have caused significant damage like we've never seen before.
Biden earlier on Tuesday promised to assist Florida in any possible way, adding that he and Governor DeSantis remained in constant contact. Hurricane Idalia reached wind speeds of up to 205 kilometers per hour at its peak, with officials saying the storm is the strongest to hit the Big Bend region in over 100 years. Ising-jae, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In Gabon, military leaders on Wednesday declared a coup and placed President Ali Bongo under house arrest. The coup came hours after the country's electoral commission declared that Bongo had won a 3rd term in office in a disputed election on Saturday. Military leaders said that the election results have been cancelled, borders closed, and government institutions dissolved. They also appointed the head of the Presidential Guard as the transitional leader. In a video message released on the same day, President Bongo appealed for help from the international community. Bongo's family has ruled over Gabon for the past 55 years. The coup has been condemned by the United Nations, the African Union, and Gabon's former colonial ruler, France, which has troops stationed there. The United States, China, and Russia have also voiced concern. Now, Russia has been hit with its largest ever drone assault. Multiple drones attacked 6 regions on Wednesday. The drone strikes reportedly damaged 2 military planes, a fuel depot, and a microelectronics factory used to make military equipment. Russia says it stopped most of the drones. No casualties were reported. Russia has blamed Ukraine for the attack and said it will not go unpunished. Kyiv has not confirmed its involvement. Meanwhile, a large-scale Russian airstrike on Kyiv left 2 people dead and 3 others wounded. Ukrainian military officials said they were able to stop 43 of the 44 Russian strikes, with the exception of 1 drone. Now, thousands of revelers on Wednesday gathered in the Spanish town of Buñol to take part in La Tomatina, often referred to as the world's messiest festival. Participants hurled overripe tomatoes at each other for an hour in the city's streets, after which the cleanup process began. According to organizers, there were some 15,000 participants and 120 tons of tomatoes. The festival takes place on the last Wednesday of August each year. It is said to have started back in 1945 amid an argument between villagers. And finally, for the first time in over a decade, night skies around the world are being lit up by a super blue moon. The phenomenon has already been witnessed by sky gazers across the world, including Turkey, Japan, India, and Greece. It will last for just a few more hours. Despite the name, the rare spectacle is not blue in color. Rather, it's a combination of 2 events. Namely, a blue moon, which occurs when there is a full moon twice in a calendar month, and a supermoon, which occurs when the moon is closest to the Earth, giving it a brighter appearance. There won't be another super blue moon until 2037. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Unlike expectations, it rained most of the day in Seoul yesterday, but the capital and central regions are having much sunnier skies this afternoon. Even UV rays could go up to a height of very high, but it's another day of pouring rain for those in the southern parts of the country, as rain clouds are dropping 30 to 60 millimeters an hour of downpours. Gyeongsangdo and nearby areas could see up to 150 millimeters of rainfall through Friday. Jeollado and parts of Gyeongsang-Bukdo provinces could see 20 to 80 millimeters of more rainfall. After the highs are 2 to 5 degrees higher than Wednesday, most parts are seeing highs at 28 degrees Celsius this afternoon. On and off rain continues in the south and Jeju through the weekend. Then it will rain nationwide on Sunday. Meanwhile, temperatures in the capital area will remain a few notches higher than season norms for the next 5 days. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions. Well, those are the headlines at this hour here in this part of the world, but do stay with us for our panel session coming up right after this break.